The stagecoach rattled into Steins Pass, New Mexico territory, on a scorching afternoon in June of 1882, carrying a bride who had brought along more than just her trousseau. Jennifer Summers pressed her handkerchief to her forehead as she peered through the dusty window at the ramshackle buildings lining the dirt road. Beside her, her mother Ruth shifted uncomfortably, her weathered hands gripping the worn fabric of her skirt. They had traveled for 3 weeks from Pennsylvania, each mile taking them further from everything familiar and closer to an uncertain future. "Jennifer," Ruth whispered, her voice tight with worry, "perhaps we should have written to him about me coming along." Jennifer squeezed her mother's hand. "Too late for that now, Mama. Besides, I could not leave you there alone, not with Father gone and the bank threatening to take the house." The stagecoach lurched to a halt outside the small depot, dust billowing around the wheels. Jennifer's heart hammered against her ribs as she smoothed down her traveling dress, knowing it was hopelessly wrinkled and stained from the journey. She had exchanged letters with Graham Jensen for 6 months, his words painting pictures of a thriving ranch and a life of honest work under wide open skies. His photograph showed a serious man with strong features and dark hair, perhaps 30 years old, though the formal portrait revealed little of his character beyond the determined set of his jaw. The driver opened the door, and Jennifer stepped down into the blazing heat, then turned to help her mother descend. Ruth was only 45 but looked older, the years of hardship etched into her face. Her husband's death from pneumonia had left them destitute, and when Jennifer had seen the advertisement seeking a mail-order bride, it had seemed like the only option that would not leave her mother alone and penniless. "Miss Summers." A deep voice cut through the afternoon stillness. Jennifer turned to find the man from the photograph standing before her, though the picture had not captured his true height or the breadth of his shoulders. Graham Jensen stood well over 6 feet tall, his skin bronzed from years in the sun, his dark hair slightly too long beneath his worn hat. He held his hat in his hands now, his brown eyes studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Mr. Jensen," she managed, dipping her head in greeting. "I am Jennifer, and this is my mother, Ruth Summers." Graham's gaze shifted to Ruth, and Jennifer watched his expression carefully, searching for any sign of displeasure or surprise. His letters had never mentioned space for additional family members, and she had gambled everything on his compassion and decency. "Madam," Graham said to Ruth, his voice respectful. Then he looked back at Jennifer, and she saw a flicker of confusion cross his features. "Your letters did not mention your mother would be joining us." "I know," Jennifer said quickly, stepping forward. Her words tumbled out in a rush. "I should have written, but I was afraid that if I did, you might refuse and I could not leave her behind. My father passed away 6 months ago, and we lost everything. She has nowhere else to go, Mr. Jensen. If you cannot accept both of us, I understand, but I will not marry and leave her alone." She held her breath, watching emotions play across his face. Ruth remained silent behind her, but Jennifer could feel her mother's fear as tangible as her own. Graham was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed this unexpected development. Then he looked at Ruth again, really looked at her this time, and Jennifer saw something soften in his expression. "I have room for family," he said finally, and the simple words nearly brought Jennifer to her knees with relief. "My ranch house is larger than I need for just one man." "Your mother is welcome, Miss Summers. I would not separate a family, especially not after you have traveled so far." Ruth let out a small sound, her hand coming to her mouth, and Jennifer felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You cannot know what that means to us." Graham placed his hat back on his head and gestured toward a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses. We should collect your belongings and head to the ranch before dark. It is about an hour's ride from town." As they loaded the few trunks and bags that contained everything Jennifer and Ruth owned, Jennifer found herself stealing glances at the man she had agreed to marry. His hands were large and capable, calloused from hard work, and he moved with an economy of motion that spoke of someone accustomed to long days of physical labor. He was gentle with Ruth, helping her up onto the wagon seat with care, and Jennifer felt a flutter of hope in her chest. Perhaps this would work out after all. The ride to the ranch took them through rugged terrain, all scrub brush and rocky outcroppings with mountains rising in the distance. Graham sat on the wagon seat beside Ruth, with Jennifer on her mother's other side, and he pointed out landmarks as they traveled. "That is Pelinsillo mountain range to the west," he said, indicating the jagged peaks. "The ranch sits at the base of the foothills. Good grazing land, and there is a creek that runs year-round through the property." "How long have you had the ranch?" Ruth asked, and Jennifer was grateful her mother had found her voice. 5 years, Graham replied. "I worked for another rancher for 8 years before that, saved every penny until I could buy my own land. Started with 50 head of cattle. Now I have close to 300. "That is impressive," Jennifer said, meaning it. She knew little about ranching, but she understood hard work and determination. Graham glanced at her, and for the first time, she saw a hint of a smile touch his lips. "It has been a lonely life, though. That is why I placed the advertisement. A ranch needs a family to make it a home." His words settled over Jennifer like a warm blanket, easing some of her anxiety. He had wanted a family, and now he would have won, just perhaps not exactly as he had imagined. The ranch house came into view as they crested a small rise, and Jennifer felt her breath catch. It was larger than she had expected, a 2-story structure built of adobe and wood with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Outbuildings dotted the property, including a large barn, a stable, and what looked like a bunkhouse. Several men moved about their work, tending to animals and equipment. "You have hired hands," Ruth observed. 6 of them, Graham confirmed. "Good men, most of them. They live in the bunkhouse and take their meals there as well. My foreman is Miguel Ortega. He has been with me since the beginning." As if summoned by his name, a stocky man with graying hair and a weathered face approached the wagon. His eyes widened slightly when he saw the 2 women, but he recovered quickly, greeting Graham in rapid Spanish before switching to accented English. "Boss, you did not say there would be 2 ladies." "I did not know myself until today," Graham replied easily, setting the brake on the wagon. "Miguel, this is Jennifer Summers, my intended, and her mother, Ruth. Ladies, this is Miguel Ortega, the best foreman in New Mexico Territory." Miguel swept off his hat and bowed. "Welcome, senoras. It will be good to have ladies at the ranch again." "Again?" Jennifer asked as Graham helped her down from the wagon. "My mother lived here until 2 years ago," Graham explained, his voice quiet. "She passed from a fever. I nursed her myself, but it was not enough." Jennifer saw the grief that still lingered in his eyes and felt a pang of sympathy. "I am sorry for your loss," he nodded, then turned to help Ruth down. "Come, let me show you the house." The interior was clean but sparse, the furnishings basic and utilitarian. The main room held a large fireplace, a table with chairs, and a few worn but comfortable-looking armchairs. A kitchen area occupied one corner, with a cast-iron stove and shelves lined with dishes and supplies. Stairs led to the second floor. "There are 4 bedrooms upstairs," Graham said, leading them up. "I have been using the largest one. I thought you and I would take that one after we are married, Miss Summers, and your mother can have the room next to it. The other 2 rooms are empty, ready for whatever use you see fit." He showed Ruth to a spacious room with a window overlooking the front of the property. It held a bed, a dresser, and a washstand, simple but clean. "This is more than generous, Mr. Jensen," Ruth said, her voice thick with emotion. "I will earn my keep, I promise you. I am a good cook and can help with the household tasks." "I would appreciate that, madam," Graham replied. "I have been managing on my own, but I cannot claim to be much of a cook beyond basic trail food." He showed Jennifer to the master bedroom, and she felt her cheeks warm as she stepped inside. The large bed dominated the space, covered with a simple quilt. It was strange to think that soon she would share this room with a man she had only just met. "I know this must be overwhelming," Graham said quietly from the doorway. "We can take our time getting to know each other before the wedding. There is no rush." Jennifer turned to face him, grateful for his understanding. "How much time do you think is appropriate?" He considered this, his expression thoughtful. "What if we say 2 weeks? That will give you and your mother time to settle in, and you and I can spend time together, see if we suit each other beyond letters on a page." "And if we find we do not suit?" Jennifer asked, needing to know. Graham met her gaze steadily. "Then I will still honor my commitment to provide for you and your mother. You have my word on that, but I hope we will suit, Miss Summers. Your letters gave me hope for the first time in a long while." His honesty touched her deeply. "Please call me Jennifer, and I hope so too, Mr. Jensen." "Graham," he said, a small smile playing at his lips. "If we are to be married, we should use our given names." Over the following days, Jennifer discovered that Graham was a man of his word in every respect. He rose before dawn each day to work with his cattle and horses, but he always returned to the house for meals, making time to talk with her and Ruth. He was patient in answering their questions about ranch life, and he listened with genuine interest when they spoke of their life in Pennsylvania. Ruth bloomed under the routine and security of the ranch. She took over the cooking with enthusiasm, preparing meals that had Graham and his men singing her praises. The kitchen became her domain, and Jennifer often found her mother humming as she worked, something she had not done since before Father died. Jennifer spent her days learning about the ranch, walking the property and familiarizing herself with the rhythm of life there. Graham would often join her in the evenings, and they would sit on the porch as the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. "Tell me about your parents," Jennifer said one evening, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. Graham was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "My father died when I was 12. He was a farmer in Kansas, and we were caught in a drought that lasted 3 years. It broke him. My mother and I came west after he passed, looking for a fresh start. She was strong, my mother. She worked as a seamstress and a laundress, whatever it took to keep us fed and sheltered. When I started working, I promised her I would give her a better life someday." "And you did," Jennifer said softly, "for a little while." He turned to look at her, and in the fading light, his eyes held a depth of emotion that made her heart ache. She was so happy here those last 3 years. She loved this land, loved watching the ranch grow. I just wish she could have lived long enough to see it really thrive. Without thinking, Jennifer reached over and placed her hand on his. His skin was warm and rough beneath her palm, and she felt him start slightly at the contact before his fingers curled around hers. "She would be proud of what you have built," Jennifer said. They sat like that, hands linked, until the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. It was the first time they had touched beyond the practical courtesies of daily life, and Jennifer felt something shift between them, a tentative bridge being built across the gap of unfamiliarity. The 2 weeks passed more quickly than Jennifer expected. She found herself looking forward to the time she spent with Graham, whether it was riding out to check on the cattle or simply sitting together in the evening. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, making her laugh when she least expected it. He was also remarkably kind, not just to her and Ruth, but to everyone around him. She watched how he treated his ranch hands with respect, how he listened to their concerns and valued their input. One afternoon, Graham asked if she would like to learn to ride properly. Jennifer had ridden before, but only sedately through town on a gentle mare. Ranch riding, Graham explained, required more skill. He saddled a pretty chestnut mare named Clementine and led her to the corral. Jennifer changed into a split riding skirt that Ruth had quickly sewn for her, more practical than a traditional dress, and met him there with her heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "Clementine is gentle but responsive," Graham said, holding the mare's bridle. "She will take care of you, but you need to show her you are in charge." He helped Jennifer mount, his hands steady at her waist, and she tried to ignore the flutter in her stomach at his touch. Once she was settled in the saddle, he handed her the reins and spent the next hour teaching her the finer points of balance and control. "You are a natural," he said finally, standing in the center of the corral as she trotted Clementine in a circle around him. "Better than I expected for someone who has only ridden in town." Jennifer felt a glow of pride at his praise. "I had a good teacher." When she dismounted, slightly wobbly from the unaccustomed exercise, Graham caught her elbow to steady her. They stood close together, his hand warm on her arm, and Jennifer looked up to find him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "Jennifer," he said quietly, "these 2 weeks are nearly up. I need to know if you are willing to go through with the marriage. If you have any doubts, any hesitation, tell me now." Jennifer thought about the question carefully. She had come to New Mexico territory out of desperation, agreeing to marry a stranger to save herself and her mother from destitution. But over the past 2 weeks, Graham had become more than a stranger. She had seen his kindness, his integrity, his quiet strength. She had watched him with the animals and his men, seen how he handled problems with calm competence. She respected him, and more than that, she was beginning to care for him. "I have no doubts," she said firmly. "Do you?" His hand moved from her elbow to her cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle. "None at all. You are more than I hoped for, Jennifer. You are brave and strong and kind. I would be honored to make you my wife." Then he leaned down and kissed her, softly and carefully, as if she were something precious. It was Jennifer's first kiss, and her eyes fluttered closed as warmth spread through her body. When he pulled back, she swayed slightly, and he steadied her with a small smile. "Was that all right?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," she whispered, her heart racing. "Very much so." They were married 3 days later in the small church in Steins Pass, with Ruth and Miguel as witnesses. Jennifer wore a simple white dress that Ruth had altered from one of her own, and Graham wore a new suit that looked slightly uncomfortable on his rancher's frame. The preacher, an elderly man named Reverend Thomas, performed the ceremony with warmth and sincerity. When Graham slipped the ring onto Jennifer's finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother, she felt tears prick her eyes. This was real now. She was truly his wife. The kiss he gave her at the end of the ceremony was chaste but full of promise, and when they turned to face their small gathering of well-wishers, Jennifer felt a sense of rightness settle over her. Miguel had arranged a celebration back at the ranch, and the ranch hands had pooled their resources to provide extra food and a fiddle player from town. Ruth had baked a cake, and someone produced a bottle of good whiskey. As the sun set, they danced in the yard, Graham leading Jennifer through the steps with surprising grace. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked, breathless and laughing. "My mother taught me," he replied, spinning her under his arm. "She said a man should know how to dance with his wife." When the celebration finally wound down and the hands retired to the bunkhouse, Ruth hugged Jennifer tightly and whispered, "Be happy, my darling girl. He is a good man." Then she disappeared into her own room, leaving Jennifer and Graham alone for the first time as husband and wife. Graham led Jennifer upstairs to the master bedroom, now truly their bedroom. Lamps cast a soft glow over the space, and Jennifer noticed that someone had laid fresh flowers on the dresser, probably Ruth's doing. "Are you nervous?" Graham asked gently, closing the door behind them. "A little," Jennifer admitted. She turned to face him, her heart pounding. "This is all so new." He crossed to her slowly, giving her time to adjust to his presence. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for. I can sleep in one of the other rooms tonight if you prefer." But Jennifer shook her head. "No, I want you here. I am your wife, Graham, truly your wife." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "You are trembling." "I know," she whispered, "but not because I am afraid of you. I trust you." That seemed to undo something in him, and he kissed her with more intensity than before, his arms coming around her to pull her close. Jennifer melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back. The passion between them built slowly, carefully, Graham always mindful of her inexperience. He was patient and tender, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, Jennifer felt a connection that went beyond the physical, a joining of hearts as much as bodies. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Graham's arms wrapped around her, and Jennifer felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. "Thank you," she murmured against his chest. "For what?" His voice rumbled beneath her ear. "For making room for family, for accepting my mother, for being kind." She lifted her head to look at him in the dim moonlight filtering through the window. "For giving me hope again." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I am the one who should be thanking you. This house has been empty too long. You and Ruth have brought life back to it." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and Jennifer dreamed of the future for the first time with anticipation rather than fear. The weeks that followed were a time of adjustment and discovery. Jennifer threw herself into learning the rhythms of ranch life, helping Ruth with the household tasks, and gradually taking on more responsibilities. She learned to cook for large groups when extra hands were hired during busy seasons, to preserve food for the winter, to tend the vegetable garden behind the house. But she also learned to work alongside Graham. He taught her to read the signs of weather changes, to identify which cattle might be sick or injured, to understand the complex dynamics of the herd. She spent hours in the saddle, riding Clementine across the range, and her body grew stronger and more capable. Ruth flourished in her role as household manager. She oversaw the domestic side of the ranch with quiet efficiency, and the ranch hands quickly learned that a compliment about her cooking would earn them extra portions. She also began tending to minor injuries and illnesses, her natural nurturing instincts finding an outlet among the men who often had nowhere else to turn for care. As summer gave way to fall, Jennifer and Graham's relationship deepened into something neither of them had anticipated. The practical arrangement that had brought them together had blossomed into genuine love. They found excuses to touch each other throughout the day, hands brushing as they worked side by side, stolen kisses in the barn, lingering looks across the dinner table. One crisp October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Graham pulled Jennifer close and said, "I never expected this." "What?" she asked, though she thought she knew. "To be this happy, to love someone this much." He looked down at her, his brown eyes warm in the fading light. "I thought I was getting a practical wife, someone to share the work and the life. I did not expect to find someone who would become the center of my world." Jennifer felt tears of joy prick her eyes. "I love you too, Graham. So much it sometimes frightens me." He kissed her then, deep and long, and they did not go back inside until the stars were thick overhead and the air had grown cold. Winter came hard to New Mexico territory that year, with bitter winds and occasional snow that blanketed the rough landscape. The ranch hands worked long hours to keep the cattle fed and protected, and Graham often returned to the house after dark, exhausted and chilled to the bone. Ruth and Jennifer would have hot food waiting and a fire blazing in the hearth, and the house became a haven against the harsh elements. During one particularly fierce blizzard in January, they were all confined to the house for 3 days. Graham fretted about the cattle and the men in the bunkhouse, but there was nothing to be done but wait for the storm to pass. To occupy their time, Ruth taught Graham and Jennifer a card game from her childhood, and they played for hours, laughing and telling stories. It was during these quiet domestic moments that Jennifer realized how completely the ranch had become home. She no longer thought of Pennsylvania or the life she had left behind. Her entire world had narrowed to this place, these people, this man who was her husband. When the storm finally broke, Graham and the hands spent days digging out and assessing the damage. They had lost a few head of cattle, but less than Graham had feared. The work of spring would be harder to make up the losses, but they would manage. One evening in February, Jennifer sat at the kitchen table going over the household accounts when she realized something that made her pause, her pen stilling over the ledger. She counted back through the weeks, checked her calculations again, and felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. When Graham came in from his work, she met him at the door, helping him out of his heavy coat. "I need to talk to you about something," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Concern immediately creased his brow. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." She took his hand and led him to the sitting area, settling beside him on the worn sofa. "At least, I do not think anything is wrong. I hope you will be pleased." "Jennifer, you are worrying me. Just tell me." She took a deep breath. "I believe I am with child." For a long moment, Graham simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming it with joy. "Truly, I am almost certain. My courses have not come for 2 months, and I have been feeling ill in the mornings." She watched his face anxiously. "Are you happy about it?" Instead of answering, he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. When he finally released her enough to look at her face, she saw tears in his eyes. "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "A baby." "Our baby." "Jennifer, I did not dare to hope for this much joy." She laughed, her own tears spilling over. "We should wait a bit longer before telling anyone to be certain, but I wanted you to know." He kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "Thank you," he whispered against her lips. "Thank you for giving me everything I never knew I needed." Ruth, of course, figured it out within a week, her mother's intuition too sharp to be fooled by Jennifer's attempts at discretion. She was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a grandmother, immediately beginning to plan and prepare for the baby's arrival. As winter gave way to spring, Jennifer's condition became impossible to hide. Her body changed, her belly swelling with the growing life inside her, and Graham became almost comically protective. He tried to limit her activities, worried she was working too hard, but Jennifer refused to be coddled. "I am pregnant, not ill," she told him firmly one afternoon when he tried to stop her from helping with the spring cleaning. "Women have been having babies and doing work for thousands of years. I will not spend the next several months sitting idle." But she appreciated his concern, even when it became overbearing, because she knew it came from love. He would place his hand on her belly every night, talking to the baby in a low voice, telling stories about the ranch, and the life their child would have. In May, a letter arrived from Pennsylvania, forwarded through several addresses before finally reaching them. It was from Jennifer's cousin Margaret, informing her that the bank had finally foreclosed on their old house and sold it to settle debts. Margaret had packed up the few remaining possessions and put them in storage, awaiting instructions on what to do with them. Jennifer read the letter aloud to Graham and Ruth over dinner, feeling a strange disconnect from the news. That house, that life, felt like it belonged to someone else now. "Do you want me to arrange for your things to be shipped here?" Graham asked. Jennifer considered it, then shook her head. "Only the photographs and Mother's good china if it survived. The rest can be sold. That life is gone, Graham. This is our home now." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand, understanding in his eyes. Summer came hot and dry, and Jennifer grew increasingly uncomfortable as her pregnancy advanced. Ruth prepared a room next to the master bedroom as a nursery, sewing tiny clothes and blankets with Jennifer's help when the heat was not too oppressive. Miguel's wife, Resita, who lived in town, came to visit and offered advice and herbal remedies to ease Jennifer's discomfort. On a sweltering afternoon in August, Jennifer's water broke while she was folding laundry. Ruth immediately took charge, sending one of the hands racing to town to fetch the doctor while she helped Jennifer upstairs. Graham paced like a caged animal, desperate to help but useless in the face of the mysterious process of childbirth. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the following day. Graham stayed close by, holding Jennifer's hand when she allowed it, stepping out when Ruth insisted he was in the way. He had never felt so helpless in his life, listening to Jennifer's cries of pain from the other side of the door. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith the following day, a new sound filled the house, the outraged wail of a newborn baby. Graham was pacing in the hallway when the door opened and Ruth emerged, tired but smiling. "Come and meet your son," she said. Graham's legs felt weak as he entered the room. Jennifer lay propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale with exhaustion. But she was smiling, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets Ruth had made. "A son," he breathed, moving to the bedside. "We have a son. Would you like to hold him?" Jennifer asked, her voice hoarse. With trembling hands, Graham took his child, staring down at the tiny red face, the miniature fingers that curled reflexively around his thumb. The baby had stopped crying and was making small, snuffling sounds, his eyes squeezed shut against the world. "He is perfect," Graham said, his voice breaking. "Jennifer, he is absolutely perfect." They named him William James Jensen, and he became the center of their universe. Graham was a devoted father, spending every moment he could spare with his son. He would rock William to sleep in the evenings, walk him around the room when he was fussy, and stare at him with an expression of such wonder that it made Jennifer's heart overflow. Ruth was equally smitten, doting on her grandson with unrestrained joy. The house that had once seemed too large was now filled with life and love and laughter, with late-night feedings and dirty nappies, and all the chaos that came with a newborn. As fall painted the landscape in shades of gold and red, Jennifer stood on the porch one evening with William in her arms, watching Graham and Miguel work with a new batch of horses in the corral. She thought about the desperate woman who had stepped off that stage coach 15 months ago, afraid and uncertain, bringing her mother into an unknown situation and hoping for mercy. She had found so much more than mercy. She had found a home, a family, a love that sustained and strengthened her. She had found her place in the world, here on this ranch in the New Mexico territory, with a man who had looked at her unexpected circumstances and said the words that had changed everything. I have room for family. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. William grew from a baby into a sturdy toddler, then a curious little boy who followed his father everywhere, trying to mimic everything Graham did. Graham was patient with his son, teaching him about the animals and the land, letting him help with small tasks that made William glow with pride. When William was 3, Jennifer discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because she was stronger now, her body adapted to the physical demands of ranch life. In the spring of 1886, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Rose, after both their mothers. Ruth held her namesake with tears streaming down her face. "She looks like Jennifer did as a baby," she said, tracing the infant's tiny features with a gentle finger. The ranch continued to prosper under Graham's careful management. He had expanded the herd and bought more land, building the enterprise into one of the most successful in the region. But he never forgot what was truly important, always making time for his family, always treating Jennifer as a full partner in their life together. When William was 5 and Sarah was 2, Graham came home one evening with news. "I have been thinking," he said as they sat down to dinner. "The town is growing and there are more families settling in the area, children who need education. What would you think about opening a small school here at the ranch?" Jennifer looked up from helping Sarah with her food, intrigued. "A school here? We have the space, and you have the education to teach. I thought maybe we could use one of the outbuildings, fix it up properly. It would not have to be just our children. We could take in some of the other ranch children in the area, maybe even some from town whose families cannot afford to send them away to boarding school." It was typical of Graham, Jennifer thought, always thinking of ways to help others, to build community. "I think it is a wonderful idea," she said warmly. Ruth nodded her agreement. "I could help with the younger children, teaching them their letters and numbers while Jennifer works with the older ones." They spent the summer converting one of the larger outbuildings into a schoolroom, with desks and a chalkboard and shelves for books. Word spread through the region, and by the time they opened in September, they had 12 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. Jennifer discovered she loved teaching, loved seeing the children's faces light up with understanding when they grasped a new concept. The school gave structure to her days and brought new life to the ranch. Graham would often stop by during his lunch break to see how things were going, and the students quickly learned to adore him, eager to show him their work or tell him about something they had learned. One afternoon in October, as Jennifer was cleaning up after lessons, a Mexican family arrived at the ranch in a wagon piled high with belongings. The father, a man named Carlos Rodriguez, approached Graham hat in hand, his wife and 3 children waiting nervously behind him. "Senator Jensen," Carlos said in heavily accented English, "I hear you are a fair man. I am looking for work. I am good with cattle, with horses. I work hard." Graham studied the family for a moment, taking in their threadbare clothes and exhausted faces. "Where have you come from?" "Texas, Senator." There was trouble there. Men who did not like Mexicans working on their ranches, who made threats. "I have a wife, children. I could not risk their safety." Jennifer watched from the schoolhouse doorway as Graham made his decision. She already knew what it would be. Her husband was incapable of turning away someone in need. "I can use another hand," Graham said. "There is a small cabin on the far side of the property that needs some work, but it is sound. You and your family can live there. I pay fair wages, and your wife will find work in the house if she wants it. Your children can attend the school we have here." Carlos's eyes filled with tears. "Gracias, Senator. Bless you. We will not disappoint you." The Rodriguez family became part of the ranch community, and Carlos proved to be an excellent worker. His wife, Maria, helped Ruth with the increased work of feeding the growing household, and their children thrived in the school environment. Life settled into a comfortable pattern. Jennifer taught during the day, cared for her children, and spent her evenings with Graham, their love deepening with each passing year. Ruth remained healthy and active, a beloved grandmother who spoiled William and Sarah shamelessly. When Sarah was 4 and William was 7, Jennifer gave birth to their third child, another son they named Thomas Graham Jensen. Graham joked that they were building their own school class, but his joy in each child was undiminished. The school continued to grow, becoming an important part of the community. Some of Jennifer's older students went on to attend universities back east, writing letters that told of their successes and thanking her for giving them the foundation they needed. One evening in the summer of 1890, as they celebrated William's 9th birthday with a party that included most of the ranch families, Jennifer stood beside Graham watching the chaos of children playing and adults laughing. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked him, gesturing at the scene before them. Graham put his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "That day you stepped off the stage coach with your mother. No, I could not have imagined this. I thought I was getting a wife. I got a family, a school, a community. I got a life richer than I ever dreamed possible. I was so afraid that day," Jennifer admitted. "Afraid you would turn us away, afraid of what the future held. And now," she turned to face him, cupping his weathered cheek in her hand, "now I cannot imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else. You gave me everything, Graham, not just a home or security, but a real life. A life full of love and purpose and joy." He kissed her softly, not caring that their children and half the county could see. "We gave each other that. We built it together." As the sun set over the New Mexico landscape, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Jennifer reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had arrived as a desperate woman with few options, bringing her mother along and hoping for kindness. She had found a man who looked at her circumstances and saw not a burden but an opportunity to open his heart and his home. Graham had said he had room for family, and those simple words had been a promise he had kept every day since. The ranch was no longer just a place of business but a true home, full of laughter and love, with a school that educated local children and a community that welcomed those in need. Ruth came to stand beside them, baby Thomas in her arms. "He is getting sleepy," she said, smiling at her daughter and son-in-law. "I will take him inside and put him down." "Thank you, Mama," Jennifer said, kissing her mother's cheek. They watched Ruth walk into the house, still steady and strong despite the years that had passed. She had found peace and purpose here too. Grandmother and teacher, and beloved matriarch of their growing family. As the party continued around them, children chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk and adults talking in comfortable groups, Jennifer leaned into Graham's solid warmth and counted her blessings. She had 3 healthy, happy children, a mother who thrived in the life they had built together, a school that made a difference in the community, and most precious of all, a husband who loved her completely, who had proven again and again that his heart was as big as the land he worked. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joys and challenges. There were harsh winters and dry summers, sick cattle and broken equipment, the everyday struggles of ranch life. But through it all, Jennifer and Graham faced everything together, their partnership strengthening with each obstacle overcome. William grew into a serious young man who loved the ranch with the same passion as his father. Sarah was bright and curious, excelling in her studies and talking about becoming a teacher herself someday. Thomas was the wild one, always getting into mischief, keeping everyone on their toes with his adventurous spirit. The school continued to be a source of pride and purpose for Jennifer. Over the years, she taught dozens of children, watching them grow and learn and eventually leave to make their own marks on the world. Some stayed in the area, taking over family ranches or starting businesses in the growing towns. Others ventured further, their education opening doors that might otherwise have remained closed. In the spring of 1895, when William turned 14, Graham began teaching him the business side of ranching in earnest. They would spend hours going over the books, discussing breeding stock and market prices, planning for the future of the ranch. William soaked it all up eagerly, and Jennifer could see that one day he would make an excellent rancher himself. Sarah, at 11, was helping Jennifer with the younger students in the school, showing a natural gift for teaching. She was patient and kind, able to explain concepts in ways that made sense to struggling learners. Jennifer watched her daughter with pride, recognizing her own love of education reflected in Sarah's enthusiasm. Thomas, at 5, was the ranch's mascot, charming everyone with his gap-toothed grin and endless energy. The ranch hands competed to let him help with various tasks, and he could often be found trailing after Miguel, asking 1,000 questions. Ruth, now in her late 50s, showed occasional signs of slowing down, but she remained the heart of the household. Her cooking was legendary in the region, and her wisdom and kindness made her the confidant of everyone on the ranch. One evening in early summer, as Jennifer and Graham sat on the porch after the children were in bed, he took her hand and said, "I have been thinking about the future." "What about it?" Jennifer asked, comfortable in the warm darkness. "William will be ready to take on more responsibility in a few years. I want to make sure the ranch is set up to be his if he wants it, and if not, to provide for all our children." He paused, squeezing her hand. "I want to make everything legal and proper, make sure you and your mother are protected no matter what happens." Jennifer felt a flutter of anxiety. "Why are you talking like this? Are you ill?" "No, no," he assured her quickly. "I am fine, but we have built something important here, Jennifer. I want to make sure it lasts beyond us, that our children and their children will have this place as a foundation." They talked late into the night about their hopes and dreams for their children's futures, about the legacy they wanted to leave. It was a conversation they would return to often in the years to come, refining their plans and adjusting as the children grew and revealed their own aspirations. The turn of the century brought changes to the region. The railroad expanded, bringing more people and more opportunities for commerce. Steins Pass grew from a rough frontier town into a real community with churches and stores and social organizations. The Jensen Ranch became known throughout New Mexico territory, not just for its quality cattle, but for its school and its reputation for fair dealing and generosity. Graham was elected to the local council, though he grumbled about the time it took away from the ranch. Jennifer knew he was secretly pleased to have the opportunity to help shape policies that would benefit the entire region. He advocated for better roads, for water rights that protected small ranchers as well as large ones, for schools in every settlement. In 1901, William turned 20 and announced his intention to marry Emma Collins, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. The wedding was a grand affair held at the ranch, with half the territory in attendance. Jennifer watched her oldest son pledge his life to the pretty young woman he loved and remembered her own wedding in the small church in Steins Pass so many years ago. Graham built William and Emma a house on the northern section of the ranch, and within a year, they had made Graham and Jennifer grandparents with the birth of a daughter named Ruth Jennifer Jensen, honoring both her great-grandmother and grandmother. Ruth cried when she held her tiny namesake, marveling at the circle of life that had brought her from the desperate poverty of Pennsylvania to this moment of joy in New Mexico. Sarah, at 17, left for teaching college in Santa Fe, though she promised to return to help with the school during summers. Jennifer missed her daughter terribly, but was proud of her determination to pursue her dreams. Thomas, at 11, was still the wild child, though he was beginning to channel his energy into working with the horses. He had a gift for gentling even the most spirited animals, a patience and intuition that surprised everyone given his usual rambunctiousness. As Jennifer approached her 40th birthday, she sometimes paused in her daily routine to marvel at the life she had built. The frightened young woman who had arrived with her mother, terrified of rejection, had become a confident woman with a loving husband, 3 remarkable children, a grandchild, and a purpose that extended beyond her own family to touch the entire community. One warm afternoon in the spring of 1903, Graham found her sitting in the schoolhouse after lessons had ended for the day. She was grading papers, her reading glasses perched on her nose, looking every inch the schoolmarm she had become. "You ever regret it?" he asked from the doorway. Jennifer looked up, smiling at the sight of her husband. Even after 21 years of marriage, her heart still skipped when she saw him. His hair was touched with gray now, his face more lined, but to her, he was still the man who had looked at her circumstances and chosen kindness. "Regret what?" she asked, coming here. "Marrying a stranger, trading your old life for this one." Jennifer set down her pen and removed her glasses, giving him her full attention. "Graham Jensen, I have never regretted a single moment of our life together. You took a desperate woman and her mother and gave us not just a home but a family. You gave me children and a purpose and love beyond measure. How could I ever regret that?" He crossed the room and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her. "I am the lucky one. You brought life and light to this ranch. You made it more than just a place to work. You made it a home." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the schoolroom that represented just one part of the rich life they had built together. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner, including William and Emma with baby Ruth. Thomas entertained everyone with a story about his latest horse training adventure, complete with dramatic gestures that had Ruth laughing until tears streamed down her face. After dinner, as the light faded and the stars began to emerge, Jennifer sat on the porch with Ruth while Graham and William discussed ranch business by the corral. "I am so grateful for this life," Ruth said quietly, her hands folded in her lap. "When James died and we lost everything, I thought our lives were over. I thought we would end up in a poorhouse or worse." Jennifer reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. "You raised me to be brave, to take risks when necessary. Coming here was the best risk I ever took." "Graham is a good man," Ruth continued. "The best of men. He has been like a son to me. He loves you too, Mama. You are as much his family as I am." Ruth smiled, her eyes glistening with tears in the lamplight. "I know. That is what makes this all so precious. He did not just accept me as an unfortunate addition to his bargain. He welcomed me, made me part of the family he was building. I will never forget that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Graham and William, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle in the distance, the chirp of crickets, the rustle of wind through the scrub brush. The years continued their steady march. Sarah returned from teaching college and took over more of the school duties, allowing Jennifer to focus on the younger children who needed more individual attention. Thomas grew into a tall young man with his father's build and his mother's quick mind, becoming the ranch's horse expert and earning a reputation throughout the territory for his skill. In 1906, William and Emma welcomed a son, Charles Graham Jensen, giving Graham and Jennifer their second grandchild. The ranch now encompassed 3 generations, each playing their part in the ongoing success of the enterprise. Ruth began to slow down more noticeably in her 60s, though she remained sharp and engaged with the family. She spent more time sitting on the porch with her knitting, watching her great-grandchildren play, offering the kind of wisdom that came from a life well lived. On a cool morning in October 1907, Ruth did not come down for breakfast. Jennifer found her mother still in bed, looking peaceful but complaining of feeling weak and dizzy. The doctor was summoned from town, and after examining Ruth, he spoke gravely about her heart giving out. "How long?" Jennifer asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The doctor shook his head. "Could be days, could be weeks. Keep her comfortable. Make sure she is surrounded by family." The next 2 weeks were a vigil of love. Ruth remained in bed, drifting in and out of consciousness, but when she was awake, she was surrounded by her family. Jennifer sat with her constantly, holding her hand, reminiscing about Pennsylvania and the journey that had brought them here. Graham read to her from her favorite books. The grandchildren visited, bringing her wildflowers and telling her about their days. On a quiet evening in late October with Jennifer and Graham at her bedside, Ruth opened her eyes and smiled. "I have had a good life," she said, her voice weak but clear. "Better than I ever expected." "Thank you both for giving that to me." "Mama, do not talk like that," Jennifer said, tears streaming down her face. "You are going to be fine." But Ruth shook her head slightly. "It is all right, my darling girl, I am not afraid. I have seen you happy, have held my great-grandchildren, have lived to see the life we built here thrive. I am ready." Graham leaned forward, his own eyes wet. "You are the heart of this family, Ruth. We love you." "I know," she whispered. "And I love all of you. Take care of each other. Keep this family strong." She closed her eyes then, her breathing growing shallower. Jennifer held her hand through the night, and just as the sun began to rise, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of pink and gold, Ruth Summers took her last peaceful breath. The loss of Ruth hit the entire family hard. She had been the grandmother who spoiled the children, the wise counselor in times of trouble, the glue that held the household together. They buried her in the small cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone that read, "Ruth Summers, beloved mother and grandmother, 1837–1907. Jennifer grieved deeply for her mother, but she found comfort in the knowledge that Ruth's last years had been happy ones, filled with love and purpose. Graham was her rock during this time, holding her when she cried, taking over the household duties she could not manage, reminding her of the strength she had inherited from the woman they had laid to rest. Slowly, life returned to its rhythms. The school continued, with Sarah taking on even more responsibility. William and Emma welcomed a 3rd child, a daughter they named Ruth in honor of her great-grandmother. Thomas, at 17, began courting the daughter of a rancher from a neighboring county, a spirited girl named Alice who could ride as well as any man. On the 1st anniversary of Ruth's death, Jennifer stood at her mother's grave with flowers in hand. Graham stood beside her, his arm around her waist, offering silent support. "She would be so proud of all of you," he said quietly, "of the family we have built, of the legacy we are creating." Jennifer leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. She was proud. "She told me so in those last weeks. She said we had given her a life beyond her dreams." "She gave us so much too," Graham said. "Her wisdom, her kindness, her love. She was the mother I lost too soon and found again when you brought her here all those years ago." They stood in silence for a while, remembering the woman who had been so integral to their lives. Then, Hand in hand, they walked back down the hill to the ranch house, to the family and the life they continued to build together. The years after Ruth's death brought both joys and challenges. Thomas married his Alice in 1910, and they settled in a house on the southern edge of the ranch property. Sarah surprised everyone by falling in love with a lawyer from Santa Fe, a kind man named Robert Harrison who supported her desire to continue teaching. They married in 1911 and split their time between Santa Fe and the ranch, with Sarah teaching during the school year and spending summers at home. Graham and Jennifer became the elder generation now, watching their children raise families of their own. The ranch prospered under the joint management of Graham and William, expanding operations and adapting to the changing times. The automobile began to replace horses for some purposes, though Graham grumbled about the noisy, unreliable machines. Jennifer continued to teach, though she began to talk about retiring and handing the school over completely to younger teachers. But she could not quite bring herself to do it, loving the work too much to let it go entirely. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1912, Graham surprised Jennifer with a trip. They took the train to California, spending 2 weeks exploring San Francisco and the coast, something they had never taken time to do before. It was a second honeymoon of sorts, a chance to be just the two of them without the responsibilities of ranch and family. Walking along the beach one evening, the sunset painting the ocean in shades of gold and crimson, Graham turned to Jennifer and said, "I love you more now than I did the day I married you. I did not think that was possible, but it is true." Jennifer stopped walking, turning to face him fully. The ocean breeze tugged at her hair, now streaked with gray, and she saw the love shining in his eyes, undimmed by the years. "I love you too," she said simply. "You are my heart, Graham. You always have been. From the moment you looked at me and my mother standing in that dusty street and said you had room for family." He kissed her then, with all the passion and tenderness of 30 years of marriage, and Jennifer felt the same flutter in her stomach she had felt as a young bride. When they returned to the ranch, they found it thriving in their absence, proof that the next generation was ready to carry on the legacy. William had handled everything smoothly, and Thomas had successfully completed a horse sale that brought in good money. Sarah had taught the summer school session and was preparing to return to Santa Fe. Jennifer settled back into her routines with gratitude for the trip, but also for the life she had here. This ranch, this family, this community, they were her greatest achievements, worth more than any adventure could ever be. As Jennifer approached 50, she finally did retire from teaching, handing the school over to Sarah, and a young woman from town who had trained under them. But she remained active in the community, serving on church committees and organizing social events that brought people together. Graham, now in his early 60s, began to step back from the daily operations of the ranch, letting William take over more leadership while he served as advisor. He and Jennifer spent more time together, riding out to favorite spots on the property, sitting on the porch in the evenings, enjoying the fruits of the life they had built. Their grandchildren were growing up now, the oldest approaching adulthood. Ruth, William's daughter, was 17 and as lovely as her name suggested, with her grandmother's determination and her grandfather's steady nature. Charles was a serious 15-year-old who loved books as much as ranching. Thomas and Alice had 4 children ranging from 8 to 2, keeping the ranch house filled with the sound of children's laughter once again. Sarah and Robert had 2 children, though they lived primarily in Santa Fe. But they visited often, and Sarah made sure her children knew the ranch and understood their heritage. On Jennifer's 50th birthday in 1915, the family threw a grand celebration. 3 generations gathered, along with friends from throughout the region. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, stories and reminiscences. Jennifer stood in the center of it all, looking around at the faces of the people she loved and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Graham found her standing alone for a moment, taking it all in, and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Happy birthday, my love," he murmured in her ear. She leaned back against him, feeling the solid strength of him, the warmth of his embrace. "Look at what we built," she whispered. "Look at all these people, this family. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life." "Believe it," he said, turning her in his arms so she faced him. "You earned every bit of this, Jennifer. Your courage in getting on that stage, coach, your faith in taking a chance on a stranger, your hard work in building this ranch into a home, all of this exists because of you." "Because of us," she corrected. "We built this together." He smiled and kissed her forehead. "Together," he agreed. As the celebration continued around them, Jennifer thought back to that frightened young woman stepping off the stage coach with her mother in tow. She remembered the fear, the uncertainty, the desperate hope that this stranger would show them mercy. Graham had given them so much more than mercy. He had given them love, family, purpose, and belonging. He had looked at what others might have seen as a burden and chosen to see it as an opportunity to create something beautiful. And beautiful it was, this ranch teeming with life, this family bound together by love and shared purpose, this community they had helped build and nurture. The mail-order bride and the rancher who had made room for family had created a legacy that would endure for generations. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its mixture of joys and sorrows, challenges and triumphs. Graham and Jennifer grew old together, their love deepening into something profound and unshakable. They became the patriarch and matriarch of a sprawling family that now included great-grandchildren, their legacy spreading across the New Mexico landscape, like the roots of the old cottonwood tree that shaded their porch. On quiet evenings, they would sit together watching the sunset, hands clasped, hearts full. Sometimes they talked about the past, remembering Ruth and the early days of their marriage, the struggles and the victories. Sometimes they talked about the present, discussing the family and the ranch and the community. And sometimes they simply sat in companionable silence, needing no words to communicate the love that had sustained them through 35 years of marriage. As Jennifer approached her 55th birthday in 1920, Graham's health began to decline. He had never fully recovered from a bout of pneumonia the previous winter, and though he tried to hide it, Jennifer could see him growing weaker. The doctor spoke of a worn-out heart, too many years of hard work and stress taking their toll. William took over all the ranch operations, insisting his father rest. Graham chafed at the restrictions but was too weak to do more than offer advice from his chair on the porch. Jennifer stayed close to his side, reading to him, talking with him, simply being present as they had been for each other through all the years of their marriage. One evening in late summer, as they sat watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors, Graham turned to Jennifer and said, "I want you to know I have no regrets." Jennifer felt her heart clench. "Graham, let me say this," he interrupted gently. "I need you to know. That day you stepped off the stage coach with your mother. I thought I was making a simple decision to help someone in need. I had no idea I was inviting in the love of my life, the woman who would transform everything, who would take my lonely ranch and make it a home full of laughter and love and purpose." Tears streamed down Jennifer's face. "You saved us. You gave us everything." He shook his head. "You gave me everything. You, Ruth, our children, our grandchildren, this family we built together, that is the real wealth of my life. Not the cattle or the land or the money. This love, this family, this is what matters. They held each other as the sun disappeared below the horizon, both knowing their time together was drawing to a close but grateful for every moment they had shared. Graham passed away peacefully in his sleep. 2 weeks later, Jennifer beside him as she had been for 38 years. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched, ranch hands he had employed fairly, families he had helped in times of need, children who had attended the school he and Jennifer had founded, community members who had benefited from his leadership and generosity. They buried him next to Ruth on the hill overlooking the ranch, his headstone simple: Graham Jensen, 1852–1920, beloved husband, father, grandfather, friend. He made room for family. Jennifer grieved deeply for the man who had been her partner, her love, her best friend. But she did not grieve alone. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love and support, reminding her that Graham's legacy lived on in all of them. In the months after Graham's death, Jennifer found comfort in the school, returning to teach part-time even though she had officially retired. She threw herself into community work, into spending time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, into keeping the family together as Graham would have wanted. William ran the ranch with the same integrity and vision his father had shown, expanding operations while never forgetting the human element that made it more than just a business. Thomas continued to excel with the horses, his reputation spreading throughout the Southwest. Sarah divided her time between Santa Fe and the ranch, ensuring her children knew their heritage and understood the values their grandparents had instilled. On the first anniversary of Graham's death, the entire family gathered at his graveside. Jennifer stood before the simple stone, flowers in her hands, and spoke to the husband she still missed with every breath. "We are keeping the family strong," she told him, though she knew he could not hear, "just like you wanted. The children are thriving, the grandchildren are growing, and the great-grandchildren are learning about the man you were. Your legacy lives on, my love. It lives on in every one of us." She placed the flowers on his grave, then turned to look at the ranch spread out below, bustling with life and activity. This was Graham's true monument, not the stone marker, but the thriving family and community he had helped build. Jennifer lived another 15 years after Graham's death, remaining active and engaged with her family and community until the end. She saw her grandchildren marry and have children of their own, watched the ranch continue to prosper under William's management, celebrated the successes of all her descendants. On a warm spring day in 1935, at the age of 70, Jennifer Summers Jensen passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her children and grandchildren gathered around her, holding her hands, telling her stories of the family she had built, assuring her that the legacy she and Graham had created would endure. They buried her beside Graham and Ruth on the hill overlooking the ranch, the three people who had started it all now reunited. Her headstone read, "Jennifer Summers Jensen, 1865–1935, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, teacher. She brought love and built a family." The ranch continued under William's leadership and eventually passed to his children and then to their children, each generation adding to the legacy while honoring the foundation Jennifer and Graham had laid. The school they had founded evolved over the years but never closed, serving the community for more than a century as a testament to their commitment to education and opportunity. The story of the mail-order bride who arrived with her mother and the rancher who said, "I have room for family," became part of local legend, told and retold through the generations. It was a story of courage and compassion, of taking risks and opening hearts, of two people who found each other against all odds and built something lasting and beautiful. Years later, when descendants gathered for reunions on the ranch that still bore the Jensen name, they would walk up the hill to visit the graves of their ancestors. They would stand before the three simple stones and remember the story of how it all began with a desperate woman, a grieving mother, and a lonely rancher who chose kindness over caution and found love beyond measure. The New Mexico sun would shine down on those graves, warming the earth that held the remains of three people who had lived and loved so fully. The wind would whisper through the scrub brush, carrying echoes of laughter and music, of children playing and families gathering, of all the life that had sprung from that single moment of grace when Graham Jensen looked at Jennifer and Ruth and said the words that changed everything. "I have room for family." And in that simple statement, in that choice to welcome rather than reject, to embrace rather than turn away, lay the foundation of a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a legacy built on love, sustained by commitment, and enriched by the understanding that family was not just about blood but about the choice to make room in your heart and your life for others. The ranch still stood, a testament to what two people could build when they chose love over fear, generosity over selfishness, hope over despair. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the New Mexico landscape in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, it was easy to imagine Jennifer and Graham sitting on the porch once more, hands clasped, hearts full, surrounded by the family they had built and the love that had sustained them through all the years of their remarkable journey together.